Welcome to the very first episode of the African Policy Heroes Unveiled, woohoo, where young African leaders share their inspirational stories. To start us off, we have a very important guest today. He's an author, he is a critic, he is a leader that embodies Pan-African leadership. He is a father to many, especially to us at the Young African Leaders Program, Professor Mehari Maru. Welcome, Prof. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. And I'm very glad to join you today in this session.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. To start us off, for people who do not know Prof. Mehari, which I think are very few, who would you say is Prof. Mehari?
Well, I consider myself, like you said, Pan-Africanist to the core, a person who is concerned about the human conditions in Africa, the fact that Africa has been unable to get rid of poverty, to make sure that children grow in peaceful environment and with the necessary welfare that is necessary for children to grow up peacefully with in their community, with their parents and family members. So I consider myself as one of the persons who is continuously, perpetually engaged on questions that Africans are raising in many areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Prof. I want us in this interview, because the whole point of African Policy Heroes Unveiled is for us to share stories. I am a firm believer that through our stories, we inspire and encourage other people. And leadership is a marathon. And from time to time, we'll all have individual people that we meet along the way that inspire us and inspire the kind of leader we become. So I invite you to go back 20, 30 years ago to the Professor Mehari back then, because I believe we are today enjoying the fruits of the things that Professor Mehari 30 years ago did, So taking us back in time, who would you say is a hero, someone that you looked up to, someone that inspires you and you would say you embody their leadership skills?
Well, I think there are many exemplary individuals that are spoken of or about in families, communities, and also in schools or churches that I have encountered. But no one is close to my mother, of course, actually representing what a community mother means. Making sure that not only her own children, but siblings on the side, and also the community, taking care of community. So exemplary is a mother, or my own mother, who has brought 7 children without her husband and without extended, apart from extended family support, that have limited capacity to bring family members. So for me, my mother would be the hero, if you wish.
And going back in time and I guess double tapping on your mom, what are some of the things that your mom did that you would say, okay, that particular skill that she had, I carry with me even today?
Well, first of all, hard work, not taking anything for granted, that you have to struggle in life, but you accept also life and fate with grace, and you don't treat yourself bitterly or others because of the circumstances through which you grow. So the family that I grew up is a family that have passed through many difficult times, but at the same time with many cherished basically moments and also assets that a family still cherishes. So when I grew up as a child, and also later on as a university student, high school student, some of the most important lessons are about hard work, community, and communitarian support, and also family, extended family support, which I think have formed the core of who I am, basically contribution to community.
Absolutely. And if we double tap exactly on the conversation about community, sometimes I worry, especially with our generation, that to a certain degree we are not community oriented. Everyone is for themselves, everyone is striving for their own. What advice, I think, would you have for young people about the importance of community and thinking from a perspective of the community?
Well, I think, first of all, whether it is possible with technology and urbanization, whether maintaining the same level of communitarian engagement is possible is a question one would have always. But at the same time, I think some generations do better than others because partly you have this intergenerational conversation, which I think there is a little bit of disruption, which I understand because of technology. The time for communities to converse among themselves is disrupted significantly. And even using new technology, I think those kind of conversation has to be maintained. And previously you would see intergenerational conversation happening from elder ones to younger, and but that more now you see is horizontal conversation within the generation of technology. Whether there is a way to solve that and mitigate that kind of disruption of vertical intergenerational conversation that used to happen in communities could be maintained now is a big question. I think it's also a big question for research.
Yeah, especially looking at I think as much as technology has taken over, I think to a certain degree there's a growing need for people to also approach problems from an interconnected approach as opposed to just approaching one problem at a particular
for
time.
Africa, it is
exactly,
and it is
critical that we then converse with one another and we bring back this Ubuntu and community approach that we used to have from the olden days. So I just wanted to again go back in time. What would you say were some of the decisions that you took when you were still young that you would say young people need to look out for in terms of preparing and planning for 30 years to now, so that they can ensure that they remain relevant and they grow within their particular fields, especially in leadership?
Yeah. Well, I think the leadership philosophy one I have adopted comes, like I said, from the community. The fact that, for example, even if Mandela has said it for a long time, that if you're a leader, you speak last. But this has been what I grew in. This is a value that I grew in. You speak last, and I still maintain that. And in some society, that may not be appreciated when you appear on TV, especially where there is debate. You could feel left out because if there is no proper moderation, you can be left out. Those kind of elements that come from communitarian life values formed my leadership style. So one of the leadership style, like I said, is the speaking and listening, active listening, and also speaking last if you wish, if you want to be considered as a leader in this kind of communities now. Also the place of hard work, education, the fact that education is prioritized as a means to grow oneself, but also to show that your community can grow and you could contribute to the community also. So education, I thought, apart from hard work, apart from using my mother as a model, I think education, which she was not educated as I am, so but her thinking that education is one, if not the only way out of poverty, and also way to contribute to community, back to the community, it's something that I took to my heart, basically, that informed and formed my thinking and what I do after that. So with education, of course, I ended up studying. My focus was more into academia.
Yeah. So going back to the series that we've started today, which is African Policy Heroes Unveiled, and also talking about the importance of stories. I think a lot of the time it's rare for people to share their authentic stories with the public. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, the importance of sharing authentic stories, and what role does us sharing our stories have in terms of empowering and inspiring other people?
Well, I think Africa, at least historically, has been a continent of storytelling communities. Of course, like I said, technology changes many things, but evenings were for stories.
Yes.
Almost, I think this is ubiquitous everywhere in Africa. This is something that one can speak of without concern that Africa is not a country, that is a continent, but something that is shared among many African communities is that stories were told in the evenings within a family. And this is the way knowledge is transferred, wisdom especially is transferred, and education, if you wish, traditional education is shared. So, and I believe the need for that, for those stories is important, and those stories, if they were to contribute to development in general, broadly speaking, development, it could be cultural development too, in addition to material development, they have to be authentic in the sense that they have to be credible, that not only the speakers, but also those who are telling the story, but the story themselves have to be credible to change the mindset, the narrative within Africa. And what I see is less, the problem I see most often is that these stories are not properly told, or they are not properly propagated or disseminated through the technology we have. Most often we have new stories that are tailored to fit other narratives from other parts or values that undermine actually the story themselves, because they don't become credible. And for stories to be acceptable, they have to be credible, and the credibility comes from the messenger himself or herself. And I think that's where there is a significant lack of effort to make sure that the storytelling culture in Africa is maintained and is supported actually by technology that are emerging, be it TikTok to YouTube or other kind of. But you see increasingly the uniformity of stories that you see, which makes it undermines not only the credibility but the variation and diversity of story that could have emerged as a content from Africa.
Let's talk a little bit about the Young African Leaders Program, which I am privileged to be a part of.
Good to have you also.
Thank you so much. So I believe you are the coordinator of this program. So how do you feel about coordinating this program, and why do you think it is important?
Well, I think the first why is it important is because, my opinion, the geopolitical situation in the world requires more leadership, as we can see in politics. Almost the global problems are not specifically leaving out Africa. Africa is affected by them, and African problems are also global to a large extent. So, and most problems we are talking cannot be solved. They may not be caused by politics or governance problem, but most problems, from climate change to corruption, from poverty that is at individual level to global problems like terrorism or conflicts that we see Middle East, in Africa or elsewhere, they cannot be solved even if they are not caused by politics, but they cannot be solved without politics.
Yeah.
And at the center of the solution to these problems lies the primacy of politics. Politics has to be dealt care, has to be managed so that these problems could be solved. Now, you can't address this without a proper understanding of the contemporary debates, challenges that we have. And you cannot solve this also without the skill and the knowledge that others share, and also the emotional or cultural intelligence that is required for solving these problems. And also, you need also partnership in many ways. That the partnership will be able to provide resources, understanding, and also in addition to that, cooperation that are necessary to solve these problems. So the YALP was meant to bring that African problems are not purely African, they are global, and global problems will not leave Africa alone. They will affect Africa. As such, there is a need for, and at the center of this problem are governance problems. Politics is at the center, and we need to deal with this, and leaders will play a big role in this regard. So the idea of YALP is to equip young African leaders to understand contemporary policy, political, and technical problems that we are facing, and how to solve this through partnership with Europe and Africa, but also Africa and the rest of the world also. So the program is meant to provide this, and as academic coordinator, it is my task to think of what are the contemporary debates, what kind of speakers we need, but above all, to make sure that the admission process is so of high quality that the debates among the fellows and the speakers is of high quality, that addresses the key questions that I said, the contemporary questions that we need to address.
Awesome. I mean, I can definitely attest. We're towards the end of the program, and I can definitely attest to how interesting the program definitely has been. I want to ask also, from someone who is at home, or if they actually meet one of the Young African Leader Fellows, what are some of the qualities you think are quite important that young African leaders should embed within their leadership journeys, and how have you mirrored this within the Young African Leader Program?
Yeah, well, usually what we look for are people during admission, young people who think critically on what they are doing, and they dare and they are bold to propose new ideas apart from understanding, and propose solutions to the problem beyond glorifying problems, challenges that we are facing, or Africa is facing, or Europe is facing, the globe is facing. Beyond glorifying the problems, we look for people who are daring and bold in their proposal as a solution to these problems. And these are very, very important traits that we look in the selection process.
Awesome. Prof, in closing, we have discussed a lot of different global issues, and to a certain degree, it is important for us to have these conversations, but sometimes when you look at the state of Africa and where we are, it's very easy for us to feel demotivated and lose hope. So what kind of words of encouragement would you give to young African leaders, whether they are in the program or even not particularly in your program?
Well, I think the most important thing, in my opinion, is we shouldn't give up. That without hope, actually, there is no there is no possibility of meeting the aspirations of African and Africans in general, the population in Africa. That for leaders, the most important tool, given the circumstance in Africa, is to be optimistic. We cannot afford to be pessimistic in terms of our approach or view, because without that, we lose actually the most important element to deal with the challenges that Africa is facing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Prof, for taking the time. And in case I never get to say this, we really appreciate the work that you have done, and you've been an encouragement and source of inspiration within the continent, especially in the field of leadership. This brings us to the end of our very first series of the African Policy Heroes Unveiled. Please follow Prof. Maru if you don't already do, and of course like, comment and subscribe and follow the STG page. This is the African Policy Heroes Unveiled. Enjoy.